Hello YouTube, how's everyone doing? It's Professional here. So today I have a very interesting lore video for you guys on GTA 5, and this is real life lore video, but it's comparing it to the game. And in this video I'm going to do something that I have never really seen any other YouTuber cover. So there's been plenty of YouTubers that they do videos on Los Angeles in real life, comparing it to GTA 5, New York, in real life, comparing it to GTA 4, but I haven't found really anyone who has, and maybe it is out there somewhere, but I personally haven't seen it, of a video on North Yankton in real life, which this is actually where I am. So North Yankton, this is the state where GTA 5 starts, where Michael and Trevor pull off their first heist. Well, their first heist in the game, at least. They pulled off before that. But and then there's like a big scene later on in the game with Brad, the revelation with Brad and everything like that. And so a lot of people don't know. People say Los Angeles is based on LA. San Fierro on San Francisco, Las Venturas on Las Vegas, Vice City on Miami, Liberty City on New York. But what they don't know is they don't know that North Yankton is also a real place. And North Yankton is North Dakota. Ludendorff is based on Bismarck, North Dakota. And that is the Bismarck state capital that's right behind me. And I'm going to show you guys around this, city, show you guys a bunch of stuff, compare it to GTA. And I'm also going to shut down a lot of these stereotypes that people make about this region. I moved to the upper Midwest, 2 years ago. I'm originally from New York, but I'm not going to say what state I live in, but I will say, though, that I drove over here. So it's, this is, a few hours drive from where I live. I don't live in this city, but I always wanted to, to come out here to see it. And so you guys see right now, let's see how deep the snow is right here. And this is, this is in November. So that's probably the only stereotype on this list that people make about this state that's actually true, is that this state does get, a bit really cold in the winter time. It's actually, North Dakota is actually considered the second coldest state by most people in America. If you're wondering what the first, that's Alaska. So North Dakota is actually number 2 on that. And one of the reasons this state is so cold is because there's no bodies of water. There are some, rivers and stuff like that, but there's no major lakes, nothing like that. It's a landlocked state. And also there's not a lot of trees in the countryside. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that having more trees does do something with the temperature, but just the climate, the region, it is very cold. But if you like the winter like me and you don't mind the cold, then you would like this place. I'll show you guys around the city, and I think that you will like it. But anyways, let's start exploring here. Let me show you guys the capital. So I wanted to talk about the name of this city, Bismarck, and Ludendorff in GTA, because it's very relevant. Bismarck is Ludendorff is based mostly on Bismarck, but it does have some inspiration from Fargo also, which Fargo is the largest city in North Dakota. But anyways, the reason that this city is actually called Bismarck, it's named after Otto von Bismarck, the famous German general, which also unified Germany. The reason it's named after a German leader is because there was a massive German population that moved here when the city was founded. That's why it was called Bismarck, because of a lot of the Germans that moved out here. And you're probably wondering, why did so many Germans come out here? The reason that so many Germans came out here, and they came out here, most of the German-speaking population came out here over 100 years ago. I'm sure there are some people that still speak German here, but most people have become Americanized, over the last 100 years. There's also a lot of Native American tribes out here. North Dakota is actually a Native American tribe, and Yankton is a Native American tribe as well. So there's a lot of Native American tribes out here, but about the name Bismarck, the reason that so many Germans had actually come out here is over 100 years ago. The reason that so many Germans came out here is because a lot of the Germans that actually came out here were actually Catholics. There are actually a lot of Lutheran churches around also, which is another major religion in Germany, but a lot of the Germans that actually came out here were Catholics. One of the reasons that they actually came out here was because they were trying to, build farms and other, places that they could live. But it was also because on the East Coast, where a lot of, immigrants were coming in, over 120 years ago, like on Ellis Island, for instance, Catholics faced a lot of discrimination. The Protestants were the majority, and they still are the majority in America. But for the most part today, Catholics do not really experience discrimination, at least not on a massive scale like they did 120 years ago. So Catholics are treated really badly by the Protestant population on the East Coast. And so a lot of Catholics actually ended up coming out here because of that. Now in GTA 5, the city is called Ludendorff. And Ludendorff is a German World War I general. And so that's, you know, basically had real-life German general, Bismarck, and under German general Ludendorff. That's what it's called in GTA 5. So it's a clear reference to Bismarck, North Dakota. But let's go up to the Capitol here. I'm going to show you guys inside, around it, and talk about some history and stuff. And we're going to also, you know, show a lot of locations that are very similar to GTA 5. So this is underneath the Capitol building right here. And this is a statue right here to the Honorable John Burke of North Dakota, legislator, governor, Supreme Court Justice, Treasurer of the United States. Yeah, so a bit of snow here, and this is exactly, you know, why I wanted to come out here around this time. I could have come in the summer, but I wanted to come out in the winter time because I thought that, you know, if I'm gonna make a video on, like, you know, North Yankton in real life, then I might as well come out here when it's the same season as in the game, right? As for the snow, you know, I really don't mind the snow. You know, I don't care. I got boots for this. You know, snow doesn't really, you know, bother me. Maybe more when I'm driving, but it's not, you know, walking through snow doesn't really bother me. But the thing that does irritate me is ice. You gotta watch out for a lot of ice, you know, here. That's, you know, I think that's one thing that we can agree on, whether you like the winter or not. I like the winter personally. I prefer it over summer. Some people think I'm crazy for that, but yeah, I like the winter mostly. This is the only thing I don't like about winter is ice, but other than that, I love winter. Yeah, got another view of the building here, and let's go on inside right now. I will go on inside. I'll show you the main hall in the building, and I'll show you guys the top, because I'm pretty sure you can actually go to the very top of the building, and I'll show you what the whole view of the city looks like. Okay, so we are now inside the Capitol building, and there's a museum which I'm going to show you guys in a little bit too. But here there's a bunch of different pictures of, you know, famous people, and I'm gonna record this a little bit, and then I'm gonna show you guys the observation deck, because you can actually go to the top floor here, and I'll show you guys just what the view looks like of Bismarck, and it's very, very similar to Ludendorff in GTA. If you just look at it, it's extremely similar. But anyways, let's take a look here. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the famous people here. We got here Brynhild Howland. In her retirement in 1990, Brynhild Howland was the nation's longest-serving incumbent state legislator, 52 years of service. She was born July 28, 1905, near Minot on the farm homesteaded by her Norwegian immigrant father. In her 1954 book, Ladies in Courage, Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, "Go down the list of laws passed by the North Dakota legislature in the last 15 years, and you will find the Brynhild Howland, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, had a hand in every one of them. She helped develop legislation in the 1940s, creating a medical care program since modeled by other states. She has served on the board of directors of the International Peace Garden since 1953. Howland's favorite motto helps explain her success. Most any good thing can be accomplished if you aren't particular about who gets the credit." Admiral William A. Owens. On March 1, 1994, Admiral William A. Owens was appointed by President Bill Clinton to serve as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and became the second highest ranking military officer in the country. He was born, raised, and graduated from high school in Bismarck, North Dakota. He attended the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, was a commanding officer by a submarine squadron serving more than 4,000 hours in a submarine. He commanded the U.S. 6th Fleet during a Desert Storm and retired from the Navy on February 27, 1996. Here it looks like we got a famous pilot. People that are interested in aviation will probably want to hear about this. Carl Ben Ailson. A native of Hatton, a community in northwest Trail County, Carl Ben Ailson won worldwide acclaim for his pioneering aviation efforts. From a tour of duty in the Army and service in World War I, early barnstorming days throughout the Midwest to daring exploratory, humanitarian, and early commercial flights in the Alaskan frontier, Ailson endeared himself to the citizens of North Dakota, Alaska, and indeed the world. With fellow aerial explorer Hubert Wilkins, Ailson piloted the first flights across the Arctic and Antarctic in the late 1920s. That was really dangerous, especially back then. You know, a lot of these planes, almost all the planes back then were made out of wood. Receiving worldwide acclaim and expanding knowledge of the previously unexplored areas and future aviation routes. A contemporary of pioneer aviators such as Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart, Ben was awarded the Harmon Trophy by President Hoover in recognition of the most outstanding aviation feat in 1928. Returning to his beloved Alaska in 1929, Ailson established Alaska Airways, fulfilling a lifelong dream of commercial aviation. I didn't know that. So he's responsible for Alaska Airways being created. Ben, along with his mechanic Earl Borland, perished in 1929 while attempting to rescue the crew and cargo of an icebound ship in the Bering Strait. Carl Ben Ailson, the polar pilot, took North Dakota's pioneer spirit to the skies. The Bering Strait is actually that Bering Strait is basically that body of water in between Alaska and Russia. It's also where you know, when you're thinking of, you know, games, you're thinking Call of Duty 4, the first mission, the cargo ship mission, actually takes place there. But you know, there's a lot of pictures here, but I'm going to show you guys you know, one part here that I found very interesting before we go up to the observation deck, and that is the Theodore Roosevelt Rough Riders Award, North Dakota Hall of Fame. So Theodore Roosevelt has, you know, pretty significant painting here, and you know, I like history a lot, and I'll tell you this guy's one of the greatest, like, you know, American presidents. He did a really good job, you know, as president. He did a lot of really interesting things, you know, I personally think he's, you know, probably also the most underrated president. Also, like, a lot of people don't think of him when they think of, like, you know, the best American presidents. But let's read here. Theodore Roosevelt. As a young man, he operated 2 ranches in the Badlands of what is now North Dakota and retained a lifelong affection for the area and its people. In 1901, he became the 26th president of the United States and served until 1909. In later years, he remarked, "I have always said I would not have been president had it not been for my experiences." President Roosevelt was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1906 for his role in settling the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. That's true. He had the delegation of both the Empire of Japan and the Empire of Russia summoned, and he helped end the war. He was awarded the Medal of Honor on January 26, 2001 for leading a charge at San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War on July 1st, 1898. So, yeah, that's the thing, is the exact same time that Red Dead Redemption 2 was actually taking place, America was actually at war at that time. We were actually at war with Spain. And so he led the Rough Riders, which was a cavalry division who had lever-action rifles during the Spanish-American War. And the Battle of San Juan Hill was one of the most important battles in that war. America ended up winning that war, and that's actually how America acquired Guam. They acquired Wake Island. They acquired Puerto Rico. They made Cuba a protectorate of theirs, and also the Philippines a protectorate of theirs. However, though, a lot of the territories, like in Cuba and the Philippines especially, like, a lot of people there didn't feel like they had independence, and so that actually led to some wars in the Philippines later on. But Roosevelt actually has a pretty interesting story in how he actually became president. Basically, he was actually made vice president, and he was actually McKinley's vice president. And when he was actually made vice president, you know, Roosevelt was a really big anti-establishment guy. Like, he didn't like he hated Washington. He hated, like, you know, the big top elites in the government. And so they actually put him as vice president. And they put him as vice president because they figured that he actually wouldn't be able to do much. And they figured that that was a way to, you know, to get rid of him, that he wouldn't he wouldn't be able he wouldn't run in other offices, and, you know, he really wouldn't have that much power. You know, vice president, you know, at that time, you know, vice president, you know, president does most of the stuff today. Vice president does help a lot, but back then the vice presidents actually did not help that much. And what ended up happening was McKinley actually got assassinated by an anarchist. And ended up happening is Roosevelt actually ended up taking power. So ironically, they put him as vice president because they thought that he would never be able to get to the presidency, and then that actually helped him when McKinley was assassinated. And so basically, the reason that Roosevelt is such a popular president is because he just had so many, so many things that, he was considered a war hero, but in terms of his policies, for instance, he created, some of the first national parks in America. He loved wildlife. He loved the environment. So one of the best things that he did is he actually ended up cleaning up the meat processing plants, which were just a massive, disgusting, place. Back then, what actually happened is the meat packing plants, they had no regulation. There was no, sanitary requirements. And so what would happen back then is, as they were processing the meat would fall on the floor, and they would just put it right back on the conveyor belt, and then they would end up serving this in the supermarkets. There was rats all over these meat processing plants. Rats, chewed into the meat, and then people ate that. People got sick. This definitely, this is one of the reasons why people actually live longer today, because back then the food that they ate was, much less healthy, and had tons of way more diseases in it, because there wasn't really many sanitation standards. And what ended up happening is Roosevelt cleaned up those meat packing plants. He put in a lot of new regulations in regard to that. He also put in health inspectors. So whenever you think of health inspectors coming into restaurants, that's Roosevelt who did that. And I think that's, personally, I think that's one of the best things that he did. So he's saved how many lives going down the road because of just all the food that he's cleaned up. Just imagine if he never had health inspectors. Imagine how that would be. But yeah, so just think of that. Whenever you think of health inspectors, you think of Roosevelt. Also, he was responsible for creating the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which is basically whenever you see those labels. So whenever you eat food, a snack, and you look at the back of your potato chips, you look at the back of it, and you see the little label, nutrition facts. Roosevelt was responsible for that. So you had to companies had to explain what was in their food, all the ingredients and everything like that, and so what you're eating, because back then you just you were told this is what this is, and you didn't really necessarily know that. Also, another great thing that he did is he actually started busting up the big businesses. So back then what actually happened is you had massive monopolies when it came to trains, oil, a lot of different businesses. And how these basically worked is, you had one company that would control everything. Like in one state, they would control all the railroad lines. You would have one area where a company would control all the oil there. And so you see that the reason that's a problem is because if there's only one company that's controlling everything, they can basically charge as much as you want, and there's no competition, there's no one else to go to. So he broke up a lot of the monopolies. He put in antitrust laws, which trusts were basically when two companies would work together, and so one company would set their prices high, and the other company would set their prices lower, and then they would change it, and the other company would set their prices low, and the other one would set their prices high. It was a way for companies to manipulate the market. And he said, no, none of this stuff. This is not how we're going to do it. We're going to encourage competition, and so that's that is, he had just, and there's, way more things, going down the line of just, accomplishments that he's had. But he was a very popular president. He nearly won the election leading up to World War I, but Wilson won. And the reason that Wilson actually won is because he actually tried to create a third political party. And I forget what the name of the party was, but Roosevelt is actually not to get into politics, I hate politics, it's a gaming channel, but Roosevelt is actually the closest an American president, or an American politician, I should even say, has gotten to actually making a third party. Because in America, we only have really two main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And, there are smaller parties. You have the Libertarians, you have the Green Party, you have Constitutional Party. But the thing is, a lot of these political parties really don't, have much chance of winning. But it's almost always Democrat or Republican. And so a lot of Americans, including myself, we don't like that. But he got really close to that. He almost made a third party, and I wonder what this country would be like today, personally, if he had succeeded in making that third party. But he was a very popular president, and definitely, I would say, definitely one of the best presidents of all time. And one more interesting story I'll tell you guys about him. So, actually two really quick I'll tell you about him. So the reason that he's actually called, when you think of, the stuffed animal teddy bear, you think of that, but the reason people don't think about why it's called teddy bear, the reason that it's called teddy bear is because Teddy Roosevelt was like an avid hunter. And so what happened was the Secret Service actually ended up capturing like a small bear, and actually ended up tying the bear to a tree, and we're expecting him to shoot it. And he said that he's not gonna, you know, kill this this poor bear. And what ended up happening is when the media found out about the story, they ran the story, you know, exploded all over the country. And when teddy bears, you know, started getting more popular, they were actually nicknamed teddy bears in result of that, because Teddy Roosevelt did not want to shoot a poor bear. There's also a second story. There was actually the post office. There was a post office in Indianola. Indianola, if I'm pronouncing the town correctly. This is not in Indiana, this is actually in Mississippi, but that's just the name of the town. This was in the early 1900s, I think 1903. And what ended up happening is the postmaster at that town, her name was actually Minnie Cox, and she was an African-American woman. There's a postmaster in this Mississippi town. What ended up happening was people, you know, a lot of racist people really didn't like that. She started getting death threats. You know, people were protesting over that. You know, people were just upset that a black woman was the postmaster in the in this, you know, small town in Mississippi. A lot of, you know, the people were just being massive scumbags to her and harassing her, and she was, you know, getting death threats, and even politicians joined in on this. Even politicians started threatening her. And before this, Roosevelt was actually praising her for, you know, the hard work that she was doing in running that office. And you know, when Roosevelt found out about this, you know, this death threats that this poor woman was getting, basically what he ended up doing is he ended up actually shutting down the entire post office there and cutting all aid to it, and Minnie's salary continued to be paid. So so he ended up paying Minnie's salary still, and he punished the entire town over that. So he punished the people that were, you know, constantly threatening her, bullying her, demanding that she resign. She ended up moving away eventually because she just feared for her life. But you know, when he found out about this, you know, he was just, you know, furious about how the town had treated her, and so he punished the entire town over that. So that's an interesting story that you actually don't hear about. But you know, I guess that'll be it for Roosevelt. I find him, you know, personally a very interesting president, and you know, if I was to ever make like a list, top 5, you know, top 5 best U.S. presidents, he would definitely be on that list. But anyways, let's go up to the observation deck. I'll show you guys what the top of this building looks like. Okay, so here we are. We're going to the observation deck here now. Okay, so this is the top floor. So correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is actually the tallest building in all of North Dakota. But this is what Bismarck looks like here. So you guys see. And now let me actually put up on the screen a picture of Ludendorff from the top in GTA. So yeah, you guys see that. You guys see how similar it is. Now, Ludendorff in GTA does take a little bit of inspiration from Fargo as well. Fargo is the largest city in North Dakota, but it's mostly based on Bismarck. But this is, you know, this is what it looks like, as you can see here. Oh, here we go. Take a look at this right here, guys. This is North Dakota Badlands, and this is a picture from the Wild West. Look at this. Does this look very familiar to anyone right here? You see that? It looks just like the area around Valentine. So yeah, the area around Valentine in Red Dead Redemption 2, that area is actually would be, you know, south of North Dakota, around that area. You know, the Badlands, I know the Badlands are more to the, they're more to the western part. And so basically, for people that don't know what Badlands are, a lot of people mistake the Badlands for mountains. They're not the same. Mountains are like, you know, much taller. Badlands are basically an area where there's like these, you know, weird like rock formations like that, and it's just hard to get through the area. It's like, it's not easy terrain to get through. That's, you know, why they're referred to as Badlands. A lot of Badlands that are, you know, around the a lot of Badlands that are around the world. Reconstruction of Indian mounds, 1930s. So yeah, the this part of the Midwest has like a lot of Native American tribes on it, and like I said, Yankton is actually a Native American tribe, and so is Dakota. Hello. Yeah, so you got a pretty really good view. This building just has a really good view of the city. Very good view. And what I'll say about what I will say also about North Dakota, and this is, you know, this is again, you know, what a lot of people get wrong. A lot of people get the geography of the state wrong. Now, you guys are seeing, there's a lot of trees here. You guys can see here in Bismarck, a lot of trees going on for miles. And so basically, a lot of people think that like North Dakota has like no trees, which is just, you know, false. It is, you know, basically here's what's true and what's not true. In the cities, you're gonna see a lot of trees. In the towns, you're gonna see a lot of trees. In the countryside, you're gonna see mostly fields, mostly like flat lands. But you are gonna have like basically small patches of like trees, like in those flatlands. So basically what will happen in the fields is you'll have like, I might show that a little bit later in the video, but you might be driving for like a few miles, see like a few patch of trees, driving for a few miles, see like a few patch of trees. And let's see here if I could. If I can zoom in, you can see that out in the distance there, once you get outside of the city, there's very little trees once you get outside. And so it's yeah, that is basically that is the observation deck. So I hope that you guys like the view here. Yeah, this was definitely my favorite stop of the trip, was definitely up here. I just like the view, just like seeing it for miles. Pretty interesting view from up here. So here we got you know, an interesting statue. I like history a lot, so I thought I would also mention this. This is a statue to Sasakawea, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now basically her story, she is a Native American woman that helped Lewis and Clark on their expedition. So basically what happened was over 200 years ago, 220 years ago, this land actually technically belonged to France. And what happened was Thomas Jefferson, who was the president at the time, actually ended up purchasing the land in the Louisiana Purchase. He purchased it from Napoleon. Now, Napoleon was actually fighting numerous wars in Europe. He was fighting against the British, the Russians, the Prussians, the Austrians. Napoleon had like a lot of wars, and so Napoleon wanted a lot of money to fund his campaign, and so he sold the Louisiana Purchase to the United States. Now, this land that he actually sold, not to be confused with the state of Louisiana. The Louisiana Purchase is a massive amount of land, and a huge chunk of our country today is actually from the Louisiana Purchase. Sasakawea. So she had guided the explorers. The Shoeshine Indian bird woman who in 1805 guided the Lewis and Clark expedition from the Missouri River to the Yellowstone, elected by the Federated clubwoman and school children of North Dakota, presented to the state October 1910. So that is her story. She's just an interesting figure, and I always like reading a lot of these stories and these events. Yeah. Make sure to use the rail here. Don't want to slip on the ice. That would be really bad. But what I was gonna also, one thing that I forgot to mention, this is also an important thing, is that remember how I said a lot of the Catholic, German population actually came out here. The thing about that is that there's, a lot of people were good people that moved out here, but then there was also some people that had caused a lot of problems. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the Catholic population that actually came out here, even though they escaped discrimination from the East Coast, because Protestants were discriminating against them for being Catholic, what happened was when they came out here, there's a lot of Native American tribes. North Dakota is like one of the states where you have the most amount of Native Americans in. A lot of the Catholics that came out here were trying to push their religion onto the Native Americans. And so even though they experienced discrimination themselves, they had actually tried to push their religion onto the Native Americans. And the Native Americans really didn't like that. And so there was, massive conflict about that. But that's also, that's also another part of history. That's why it's important to read history from, all angles and try to cover all stories about it. Not just, pick and choose the history that you personally like. But let me show you guys the museum now. Okay, so this is the museum. Bison hunt. A single bison drive could easily kill hundreds of animals, which created an immediate problem of how to process this large quantity of meat without waste and spoilage. Most members of the tribe participated in the bison hunt. Hunters drove and killed the animals using guns as well as bows and arrows. After removing the hide, women quickly sliced the meat into strips and hung them on racks of dried. Today, many tribal people continue to make dried meat, which is similar to beef jerky. The bison were very important to a lot of Native American culture, and Native Americans, they hunted around this animal, and it was just extremely important to them. The fur, the meat, it was a way of life. What actually happened is the reason that the bison nearly went extinct, it was actually so close to becoming extinct, is because so many people would just kill them for no reason. And what I mean by that is, I'm not personally against hunting or anything like that. I have no issue with hunting, but my thing with hunting is that if you're gonna kill something, you're gonna kill an animal, you're gonna hunt an animal, at least a legal animal that you're allowed to hunt. If you're gonna hunt an animal that you're allowed to hunt, then when you kill that animal, you use the meat, you eat the meat, you consume the meat, and you also use the fur, for other things. If you want to sell it, or if you want to, make a coat out of it, something to make use of it. What I personally despise is I despise when people, kill stuff for, just for sport. There's no purpose to it. It's not, not for the meat, not for the fur. None of that stuff. And so what happened was, for example, you would have idiots on trains back then in like the Wild West. They would be on trains, and so people would take their rifles out of the train while the train was actually passing by in like a field like this. They would see a ton of bison, and so some idiot would be like, oh, let's try to take pot shots at like the bison while we're, while the train's moving. The bison gets shot, they would die, they would just rot there, and nobody would use the meat or anything like that. And so people would just constantly, settlers would just constantly shoot these things, these animals for just no reason, and just that's how they nearly went extinct because of that. It's just people were just being stupid. And the thing is, though, is that it's not that hard to shoot a bison. It's a massive animal. So I don't know, what these idiots were just, doing. But that's, the sad stories. People were just shoot the bison just for no reason. And that's, that's one of the reasons why the bison nearly went extinct. Here, we got some pictures of the Wild West. And so you guys are going to see some pictures on this tour that I'm going to be showing you guys. It's very similar to Red Dead Redemption 2, because a lot of the territory in Red Dead Redemption 2 is based on like the upper Midwest, at least the area around Valentine. So right here, number 13, St. Louis made percussion rifles were accurate and powerful with little recoil. They were popular with fur trappers in the West. And so that's that rifle that's up here. That's a percussion cap rifle. Now, basically what a lot of people get these mixed up because people would refer to this as a musket, but there's something, just a smoothbore musket, and then there's a rifled musket. And the difference is that a rifled musket is way more accurate. Basically how it works is, think about it this way. When it comes to, most muskets, the ones that were mass produced, back in the day, those things, basically all they were was just think of a giant pipe. And so how they would work is, you would have the pan in a flintlock, you would pour a little bit of gunpowder in the pan has a little hole in it, and you had typically a paper cartridge. You would chew off the top, you'd pour a little bit in the pan, and then you would basically put the rest of the paper cartridge into the barrel, you would ram it down, and then it would fire. And how a smoothbore, musket basically worked is when it fired, the ball would just rattle, so it would go left and right, left and right, left and right, because it has nothing to guide it. It's basically just a pipe. And that's why muskets were so inaccurate, because they just went all over the place. Like 50 yards, you could probably hit what you're aiming at, but like past then, it's, basically all over the place. Basically why soldiers stood in line warfare back then, because they wouldn't be able to hit anything. A rifled musket, on the other hand, can shoot much more accurately. You can hit something at 100 to 200 meters, back then, easily with like a rifled musket. And so this is percussion cap, which percussion cap, you would put the percussion cap right up there. So these worked a little bit differently. I don't know about percussion caps that much. I know much more about flintlocks. But yeah, so rifled musket basically had like the grooves in it, so small grooves, and so when the bullet would go, it would twist. It would like it would go in this type of way, and that made it much more accurate. Here you got little like powder horn. You would use that to pour powder into the gun, but like, a lot of soldiers, had paper cartridges back in the day, which the paper cartridges just, sped things up a lot quicker. And when it comes to because that was a percussion cap, but like basically back then, like when you think of like a good soldier could reload and fire a musket typically in 15 seconds. A lot of people think it takes like a minute. No, it's a good soldier could reload and shoot in 15 seconds. Really good soldier, I would say. But there's a lot of stuff to this museum. There's a lot of Native American there's a lot of Native American clothing, a lot of Native American exhibits, because like I said, the North Dakota is one of the states that has a very high Native American population. So here we go, 1900 Holland Special. Samuel Holland was a Norwegian immigrant to Park River, North Dakota, skilled blacksmith and machinist. He built at least 6 automobiles between 1898 and 1908. 1 steam-powered, 1 high-wheeler, 2 single-cylinder runabouts, and 2 cylinder autos. Basically this, so this is a vehicle from 1900, and so the thing about this is that a lot of people are demanding cars in Red Dead Redemption 2, but the thing is though, guys, is cars would not work in Red Dead Redemption 2. They wouldn't. The reason they wouldn't work is because you can see this vehicle. A horse would be much faster. People want cars in Red Dead Redemption 2 because they think that they're going to get around the map faster. No, you're not. You would still get around much faster on a horse. And also, a car like this, as you can just look at the wheels, you can see a car like this, the dirt terrain that's in the countryside, would not be able to handle it. And cars back then were just, some vehicles that like usually people with a lot of money would have in the cities, and they were designed to run on paved roads. And also, you really didn't have mechanics back then when they first came out. You were actually expected to fix a car on your own. So people were expected to know, the fine details of their automobile. But that's basically it. A car like this would not be able to handle the dirt terrain that you have in Red Dead Redemption 2. If you had a Red Dead Redemption game in like 1920, maybe the mid-20s, then, you followed like around the Prohibition time, maybe, yeah, you could have some decent, much better cars in the countryside. But no, the ones that, like at the time of Red Dead, you would not want that in the game. Here we got a few displays. We have a Native American one. We have looks like a World War I one. Model train set, and you can see just yeah, this is a very interesting museum, but I'm gonna have to cut it a little bit shorter here, guys. I'm gonna show you a few more things from the museum, and then I want to show you the other parts of the city, because I don't want the museum is really cool, don't get me wrong, but I don't want the whole video just to be the museum. The place was a big part of the West, the Wild West. When people think of the Wild West, they think of places like Texas. They think of places like that generally. They don't think of like the colder parts of the West. European traders visit the Mandan, Hidasta, and Arikara villages. They trade goods for produce, meat, and furs. What I'll say is, If you guys ever seen that movie called The Revenant, The Revenant is actually a really good. The Revenant's actually a really good movie. So here, like, here you have like more of a vehicle that could more handle the terrain that's in Red Dead Redemption 2, but you wouldn't have like you wouldn't have a vehicle like this until like around the 20s, or I'd say like mid 20s. And the last thing I'll show you guys here before we move on to other parts of Bismarck is homesteading in North Dakota. So this is the promise of homesteading brought more than 100,000 settlers into northern Dakota between 1879 and 1886. The Homestead Act offered people 160 acres of free land, but there was a catch. To own the land, homesteaders had to improve it, build a house, and live there for 5 years. Immigrants first had to become U.S. citizens, successfully satisfying the many requirements was called proving up. Life on the homestead had plenty of challenges: long winters, isolation, illness, prairie fires, and grasshoppers. Breaking the sod and planting crops difficult. Families lived together in cramped dwellings, often not much bigger than a bedroom today. Many who filed claims failed to prove up and left North Dakota. Do you think you would be able to prove up? And so this is basically, you can't go in here, but you guys can see, this is like what a homestead would look like. And so you guys can see, Red Dead Redemption 2 actually captured a lot of these houses pretty accurately. This is typical homestead that you would see back then. And so what they're referring to with the Homestead Act is that's basically where the government was giving people free land because they wanted people to settle on the land. But a lot of people also cheated the system. And so they settled on the land before the whole thing started. There was actually a race about when you see in the movies and they fire the revolver and then the people were just raced to get to the land and just settle on it. There's a lot of people actually cheated that and actually would get there quicker. And we're leaving the museum here. That movie, The Revenant, I'll talk about that in the next part. So I wanted to talk about The Revenant here, since we're leaving the museum. Talk a little bit about history. And The Revenant is, one of Leonardo DiCaprio's best works. And, if you follow Leonardo DiCaprio, you probably know about The Revenant. You've probably seen The Revenant. I think it's a good movie overall. I've seen the movie. But what I will say about the movie is the one thing about the movie that, I didn't like personally is that so many people went to go see the movie just because of Leonardo DiCaprio. And nothing against DiCaprio, he's a great actor. But I personally feel like if any other actor played in that movie, it would not have been as popular as it was. I went to go see the movie, not necessarily for the actor, but I went to go see the movie because I wanted to see the true story. And you're probably wondering, true story? What are you talking about? Yes, The Revenant was actually based on a true story. A lot of people actually don't know that. Most people that actually watch the movie don't know that about it. But basically, The Revenant actually takes place on the border of North and South Dakota. So it does take place in this region. It takes place, in the much, western part of North Dakota, where, Bismarck is more in the central part. But it still takes place in the same state. But anyways, about the movie, the main character, the guy in real life, his name was Hugh Glass. And he was a fur trapper. And if you want to know what's true about the movie and what's not true, the part that is true is that he did go on an expedition into North and South Dakota, and they went up the Missouri River. And now, at this point, this was a very, this was technically a U.S. territory, but it was, an ungoverned territory. And so, in the movie, when they get attacked and they go on the boats, that did happen for the most part. However, though, the parts of the movie that aren't true are that he had a Native American son. He did, in real life, he did live with the Pawnee Native American tribe, and it's believed that he did have a Native American wife, but there's no proof that he actually had a son, and he certainly didn't have a son with him on that expedition. Now, that was just thrown in, for just extra, extra stuff just to make the story a little bit more interesting, which it did make the story more interesting, to be fair, but, it's not what actually happened in the story. Now, the part that the movie does get right is when he gets attacked by the grizzly bear. In real life, he did get attacked by a grizzly bear, and he actually did get left behind by his people. That actually did happen. One of the guys' name was Fitzgerald, and the other guy's name was Bridger, I believe. Bridger was the younger guy, Fitzgerald was the older guy, so it was, much younger guy, like, young adult, 16, 17, 18, and then you had Fitzgerald, which was, a much older man. Two of them, they left him behind when they were supposed to watch him. In the movie, Fitzgerald tries to strangle Hugh Glass. That didn't really happen. They instead just left him for dead after he got mauled by the bear. Hugh Glass somehow did manage to kill the bear, but he was severely hurt, and he woke up, and he was, really just, angry that they had left him behind. And Hugh Glass was a frontiersman. He knew how to survive. He knew the land really well, and so he did everything in his power to survive, and he actually did make it off. Did survive in the wilderness. He survived on berries, most of it. He even had maggots actually eat his rotten flesh. But the most inaccurate thing about the movie, about The Revenant, the most historically inaccurate thing, isn't even the events in the movie. It's actually about the geography. Because if you watch the movie, you would think that it takes place in somewhere like Montana or Idaho because it's the tall mountains and all the trees, but it's actually not. Where it's actually taking place is it's taking place on the North and South Dakota border. It's taking place in both states a little bit. In real life, this is actually what the area actually looks like. This is the area where the Revenant took place. So this is actually where Hugh Glass's story happened. And as you can see, this looks nothing like the region that was actually portrayed in the movie. In the movie, you have big forests, mountains, not like that at all in the real life story. And why did they choose the mountains and the forest? Why didn't they instead use this environment? Because this environment is very cold, just as cold as in the movie. Very, being trapped out here in the wilderness in this type of area that Hugh Glass was trapped in at that time period, and you had almost no towns living out there. You had no large towns that you could go to or anything like that. You had maybe some trading outposts, but there was really no large towns, and a trading outpost could be for hundreds of miles. You did have Native American tribes that lived out here, but you didn't have any, large towns, anywhere that you necessarily find really quickly. So if you were trapped in the wilderness, like in Hugh Glass's time, and this was, the dead of winter, and especially you were suffering from like a bear attack, that's extremely harsh to survive. But the main reason that the directors didn't actually choose this environment, instead they gave us the fictional, mountainous environment, was because they probably thought that it'd be boring. That's probably why. If they had like, just open fields like this, a few hills, I think that a lot of people would have found that boring. But instead, they added the forest and the mountains. But that's pretty much explanation of The Revenant. I did think it was a good movie, but I didn't watch it for the actor. I watched it mostly for the historical part of the movie because I knew the story, and I was really curious to see the movie. I saw it when it first came out. I actually knew about the story before the movie actually even came out. And so when I found out that the movie was actually based around Hugh Glass, I was really excited to see the movie. And, he was, a really tough guy that he managed to survive, that environment. And if you're wondering about, what happened to the two guys that betrayed him in real life, what ended up happening was in the movie, when he gets back to the fort, he finds the younger kid who left him for dead. And the main reason he doesn't kill him in the movie is because he says he tells the commander, I remember this, he tells him in the movie that he was lied to by Fitzgerald. But that's not the real reason that he didn't kill him in real life. In real life, he didn't kill him because he thought he was too young. He felt bad. He did realize he betrayed him. He was like a 16-year-old kid at that time, and so that's why he didn't kill Bridger. That's why he didn't kill him. As for Fitzgerald, in the movie, there's a scene where he hunts Fitzgerald down, and they have like this big battle up in the mountains and stuff like that. That didn't happen. In real life, what actually happened was Fitzgerald actually signed up with the U.S. military. They do mention that in the movie, but instead what happened was Hugh Glass actually tracked him down to his actual camp, where he was actually signed up with the military. And what happened was he told the U.S. Army, commander for that camp, he told them that Fitzgerald basically left him for dead and robbed him, because Fitzgerald actually took his rifle. He took his musket. And what happened was the commander actually said, "Can you prove this?" And Hugh Glass actually said, "The rifle has my initials on it." And so what happened was the commander went for the rifle, found it with Hugh Glass's initials on it. But the commander at this point, the commander knew that something was suspicious, but he didn't have 100% proof, because even though it was Hugh Glass was telling the truth, and Fitzgerald did have his rifle. Fitzgerald, I believe that Fitzgerald was claiming that Hugh Glass had sold him the rifle. And so the commander couldn't prove, who was telling the truth. And so what the commander ended up doing was giving Hugh Glass back the rifle, and Hugh Glass actually got some compensation, so he got money also for that. But Fitzgerald was allowed to, live, and he served in the military. And I'm not sure what ended up happening to Fitzgerald, but Hugh Glass didn't kill him in the end. And the only reason he spared him is because the U.S. military, commander stopped them from doing so. Because if Hugh Glass had killed a soldier in that time period, he would have gotten hanged for it. So that's ultimately what happened. But like I said, I find The Revenant an interesting movie. It was a good movie, don't get me wrong, but there are a few things in the movie that's not true, and it's the geography. That a lot of people that actually live in this region are familiar with the movie. and they've watched the movie, but it's just the geography that pisses people off, because they see it and they see it doesn't look like that in real life. And so, that was just it. If you don't live in the area, you're probably perfectly fine with it. But that was just one thing I wanted to mention about The Revenant, because a lot of people don't know this actually happened. It was based on a true story. Watching the movie, I'd say maybe like 30 to 40% of it was true. 60% of it was probably, made up, especially like when he jumped off the cliff with the horse. Maybe, it's dramatic, make the story a little bit more interesting. But, look it up if you don't believe me. Hugh Glass, it was a, real, frontiersman. He survived the brutal, North and South Dakota winter. And, that's, that is insane. Even for that time period, especially the limited technology and, very little, settlements that he could have gotten to in that time, for him to survive that, he truly is, a warrior. And here I wanted to show you guys a display of, this is a lot of old firearms that are in the museum here, the guns of North Dakota. But you guys see, some of these weapons that you might actually recognize in, some of these weapons that you actually might recognize from Red Dead Redemption 2. But there's a lot of very interesting history behind it. That one, gold repeater, I gotta read about that one. Winchester Model 94 XTR carbine 3030, the first of 250 made for the 1989 North Dakota Sentinel of Statehood. Wow. And yeah, so that big thing in the middle, you guys are probably wondering, what the hell is that thing? That rifle. For anybody, I know a lot of people who are watching this right now thinking Battlefield 1. Yes, that's the rifle that's in Battlefield 1. That is the, it is all called a Gewehr rifle. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was a Gewehr anti-tank rifle. It's number 26 here. Mauser 19T Gewehr 13.2 millimeter German anti-tank rifle, introduced in February 1918 to deal with British tanks. It fired an armor-piercing hardened steel cord 13.2 by 92 millimeter 5.525 inch semi-rimmed cartridge. So yes, this was a World War I anti-tank rifle, and this is actually one of the first anti-tank rifles ever made. And so when tanks were introduced in World War I, they didn't have things like rocket launchers. They really didn't have that yet. And so soldiers needed ways to destroy tanks. And so the Germans had developed this to get rid of British tanks. The later tanks, I don't know tanks that well, I know firearms much better, but the later tanks in the war, I know, were not being able to penetrate it by this, but the early tanks could actually be penetrated by this. And so this, would rip through the tank whenever, you don't want to know what happens when this hits somebody. It's extremely gruesome. It's very brutal. But, the soldier who would fire this would typically go deaf or have massive hearing issues. And also just because the kick of the it was a weapon that was meant to be fired prone. You would not even want to fire it, even if you were crouched and you had a stand, you would still not want to fire this thing crouched. You would only want to fire this thing prone. And so even the soldiers who fired this thing, they would go deaf, and also this thing would just do damage to your shoulder. So your shoulder would just hurt really badly from just firing that thing. But yeah, it was a real rifle, the one that you see in Battlefield 1, and it was it's a ridiculous one. It's definitely one of the largest rifles ever made in history, definitely. Okay, so here we have the close to the end of the video. I might have one more stop after this or not, depending on what comes up. But this right here, this is actually this is the Missouri River. And so in GTA 5, there's actually a river that actually runs through North Yankton in GTA 5, but it's but the river is much smaller. I don't know if it's based on the Missouri River. So yeah, this is the Missouri River, and this is a massive river. This is a river that runs through numerous states in the U.S. Now, what this river is actually the most famous for is it's the most famous for the Lewis and Clark expedition. Remember we were talking about Lewis and Clark and Sasakawea earlier? They basically went up the Missouri River. So they actually were here over 200 years ago. So, yeah. So the, sorry about that, it's a truck that was coming through. But yeah, so this is the Missouri River, and this I'll have it linked down below, right down below how big this river actually is. Might have actually a diagram of it, a map of it. But it's massive, and it's one of the things that Bismarck is known for. And yeah, government is the government right now is shoveling. There actually isn't going to be a snowstorm for another week here, I believe. But yeah, it's November, and November you get a snowstorm, so it's well, then December and January is something else. But yeah, this is you know, big famous river, and this is actually probably one of the reasons that Bismarck was actually founded here, because of the river, because people make a living off the river. So you know, the winter time right now you're not going to really see that much stuff on the water, but in the summertime I'm assuming you would see like a lot of boats here, a lot of fishing, a lot of people on boats, and there's a ferry here, I believe, that actually goes up and down the river. But yeah, that is pretty much Bismarck here. Sorry for the noise, guys. Shoveling here.
Move quick, we can beat the train. We're getting there.
Man, I'll believe in this bird when I get eyes on it. Stay on the road! Cops! Coming our way!
Be cool. They ain't made this car yet.
So you see, this is what a residential neighborhood looks like, and it's a nice place to live. So it's you know, and the reason I want to show you residential area is because there's this like really false stereotype that people believe. I don't know why people, you know, think this stuff. Like, there's a lot of people that I grew up with that like think this nonsense. But like, people think for some, I don't know, reason that like the vast majority of people that like in a state like North Dakota, that they somehow live in like in trailer parks or something like that. It's not true. It's not true. It's that people live in mobile homes. Not denying that mobile homes exist, or trailer parks, but you know, you look at these houses, some of these houses are pretty big, and so this is not like the typical stereotype that you think. So people here, you know, people live good here. You know, it's a nice place to live. You know, a lot of people think like, you know, why a lot of people think like, you know, why live in a place like this? You know, sure, it's cold, and you know, a lot of people can't take the winter. But if you can take the winter, you know, it's a quiet place. That's probably one of the best things. It's quiet, it's peaceful, it's not loud like New York. Like, nothing against New York, it's where I grew up with, but a lot of times I just can't stand the noise. So a place like this is very quiet. Most people know each other, they grow up with each other. Very low taxes, you know, very affordable housing. You know, if you live on the east or west coast, you live in like places like California or New York, especially, like, you know, a house come out here. You could get a house out here that's like, you know, that's like twice the size of like a house in California, and for probably half the price, and I'm not exaggerating by that. Like, there are some really overpriced properties. Like, when I look at properties in New York, I am just, you know, like, it just shocks me still to this day, even though I grew up there, how expensive property can get out in New York. But here, property is pretty affordable, and it's a nice place to live. Like I said, it's quiet. You know, the snow is one thing. I guess if you don't like snow, you can, I guess that's a legitimate, like, you know, criticism to have. But, you know, I just wanted to personally break that stereotype, because I just, you know, I just don't like that personally. And people keep thinking that, like, you know, that people that live out here or live in trailer parks or they're drunks or something. That's not true. So it's, you guys can see it for yourselves. You guys see it from my video. You guys can also go on Google Maps and look up a lot of these streets. These are, you know, these are residential areas in Bismarck, North Dakota. So it's not that, you know, everyone is living in poverty like like a lot of these people that post these false stereotypes. Like, don't believe them, guys. So like I said, it's like, you know, the people that throw around these stereotypes, you know, are oftentimes, you know, people that grew up in the cities. They've had everything handed to them. They never in their life have stepped on a farm or anything like that, or gone into the countryside, gone to any kind of rural area, and so they think that they're somehow morally superior, or that they think that they're somehow, you know, better, you know, in the city. That's not true. And you know what? I'll tell you one thing here. One other thing that, like, a lot of these people don't tell you, like the people that push these stereotypes. And what I'll tell you guys is, there's this one really false stereotype that, like, a lot of people push, and it's this stupid idea that there's this one stereotype that there's this one thing that people push constantly, and they say that, like, they'll say that that rural areas are supported by the taxes of cities, and they say that rural areas cannot function without the taxes of cities. And so people in cities will constantly, like you, say that. And look, I'm not attacking anyone who lives from the city. I'm from New York City myself, from a massive city. What I'm just saying is, there's a massive problem of, like, people, like, that live in the cities, and they look down on people that live in rural areas. And I'm sure there's also the other way around. There's also people, to be fair, in rural areas that don't like city people. But what I will say is, one of the false, things that I hear, and it's a half-truth. What I mean by a half-truth is people say that the rural areas are supported completely by city taxes, which is not true. City taxes do help rural areas to a degree. I will concede that. But what these people aren't telling you, they're not telling you the other side, which is that cities need the rural areas. Cities can't function without rural areas. Cities need rural areas just as much as rural areas need cities. How? What I mean by that is, while cities might help with, like, taxes and stuff like that to rural areas, sure, the rural areas have the farms. The rural areas produce the food that goes in the supermarket. The rural areas produce the gasoline. The rural areas also are most of the time the truckers that send stuff to the supermarket. So now you take away all those things, and you see that cities can't function without rural areas too. So I just personally can't stand that when people say that, like, oh, that the rural areas are completely dependent on the cities. What they don't understand is that this is both ways. The cities need the rural areas, and the rural areas need the cities. So it's not that the city would not be able to function without the rural areas, and rural areas would probably do a little harder without cities. But for these people that think that it's only that it's only one way, and that rural areas need the cities and cities don't need rural areas, it's not true. I'm telling you right now, I'm telling you, it's not true. When the people say that only that cities that rural areas need cities and cities don't need rural areas, it's not true. Like I said, without the rural areas, you wouldn't have a lot of the farms and a lot of the truckers and the oil that you have in cities. So this right here, this place is the Kirkwood Mall. This is the largest mall in Bismarck. And so, you got plenty of stores here. If I get a copyright claim for that mall music, I'm gonna freak out. But as you guys can see, you have plenty of stores here. You got plenty of stuff to do. And so this is, I wanted to show this place. It's not like a place that you would see in GTA 5, but, Ludendorff in GTA 5 is a much smaller than what it actually is in real life. But I wanted to show you guys this specifically because I just want to, like, break this stereotype of, like, people that say that, like, people that say that, like, oh, it's, it's the middle of nowhere, it's boring, there's nothing to do. It's not true. Maybe if you live in, like, a very small town in, like, North Dakota, okay, there's not a lot of stuff to do, but this is I believe the second largest city in North Dakota. Fargo's the largest, but it's but you still got a Target right there. So got a sushi restaurant. You got plenty of stuff to do. So the point that I'm making to you guys is that I don't live in this city personally. I live in another Midwestern city, or Midwest, more of a town city, I would say. But everything that I could do in New York, where I'm originally from, I could do here. Like, there's really no difference to me. I want to go to the mall, I want to hang out at the mall, I can do that. I want to go to the movies, I can go to the movies. I can see any movie that's in New York, in the movie theaters in a place like this. If I want to, I want to go to fast food places, there's so many of those around. I can do that, no problem. There's pretty much all the activities that I can think of that, I do in New York, do in a place like this. The only thing I would say that you can't really do in this place that you could do in New York is there's really no bodies of water here. So if you like boats and stuff like that, yeah, there's no boats, there's nothing to do in that regard. But there's but that's only one thing. That's only boats. There's a GameStop right there. So the point that I'm making is, you guys can see, this is no different than, like, a mall that you would see in, like, a mall that you would see in a big city. So everything that you could do you know, in a big city, you can do here. This is technically a city, but by New York standards, where I'm from, you know, you'd refer to this more of a town. But yeah. I personally always love, like, I love, like, the malls and stuff like that around, like, you know, the holiday times, you know, seeing all the trees and the holiday music and, you know, stuff like that. I do like that personally. You know, mall reminds me a bit of Dead Rising 1. And I was actually so happy when Dead Rising 4 was actually going back to Willamette and during the holiday time, but unfortunately, Dead Rising 4 was not that good of a game. Dead Rising 1 is still the best. Well, my favorite one. Most people say it's Dead Rising 2, but my favorite one is Dead Rising 1 because I just like the setting a lot. But yeah, this is Kirkwood Mall. It would be like really cool to see like North Yankton in the DLC in like GTA in the future. I definitely would like to see that. So and you know, and because like, you know, Ludendorff, you know, was kind of small in GTA, you know, they could expand it. You know, they could add more towns and stuff like that to that, but you know, is Rockstar really gonna do something the fans want? And in this part, just for a minute long, you guys don't hear any background noise. I had to record this afterwards, and the reason is because I got a ridiculous copyright claim in this part. Yes, I actually got a copyright claim for the mall music. I'm not joking. I walked past the store right here, and they were playing a song, and UMG, Universal Music Group, actually tried to claim the whole video. That's why this video was posted today and not yesterday like I promised, because of that stupid copyright claim. But anyways, in this part that I have, you know, muted, what I was trying to say in this part is, I'm sorry if I sounded tired because I was just running around a lot. I was also pointing out that arcade that was there and, you know, the store, and I was just saying that I was trying to break the stereotypes that, you know, a lot of people think. A lot of people think about North Dakota is they think that it's some abandoned wasteland, you know, where it's boring and stuff like that. But as you guys see, it's clearly not the case. It's, you know, a lot of people have, like, you know, a false impression of what the state actually is. So I hope that this, you know, this video does also help to break those stereotypes. But sorry for this part muted. I wish I could have kept my original audio. It was just a stupid copyright claim that ruined this 1 minute here. But anyways, the rest of the video is just fine. Okay, so here we have St. Mary's Cathedral. This is a Catholic church that's in Bismarck. And I wasn't able to find a church that looks almost identical to the one that's in Ludendorff, where you have that big revelation between Trevor and Michael over Brad. There's a lot of churches that are actually in North Dakota that actually are of similar design to the one in Ludendorff, which I'll actually have a few pictures up on the screen right now. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe the church in GTA 5 is a Lutheran church. That's what I think. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah. So this church, this is one of the largest churches that is in Bismarck, and this is also, you know, what downtown looks like a bit. So this is, you know, pretty much downtown where I am. So you see, this is what downtown looks like. And let's see if we can get to the I'm gonna get a little closer to the church and see if I can go inside. I might not be able to go inside depending on if it's open or not, but we'll see. So this is inside St. Mary's. This is what it looks like. I'm sorry if I'm not talking too loud. There's just a man over there. I just didn't want to bother him. But yeah, this is what it looks like inside St. Mary's. And you know, I think like part of the structure maybe was inspired by the church in Ludendorff was inspired by it. I'm gonna write down below how old this building is, so it'll be written on the screen right now. You guys will see how old this building is. But yeah, this is the inside of the church. So, yeah, that is the church here, and if I find a church that looks very similar to the Ludendorff one, let me know in the comments down below if there's one that's almost identical to it. I'll see if I can make a video on that location in the future if it's at least a drivable distance for me. What I will say is that Trevor scene, the scene where it's called Bury the Hatchet. It's like the most infamous mission in GTA 5 where Trevor finds out the truth about what Michael was hiding, that Brad was really buried there. And the thing about that scene, let me actually play that scene right now for you guys.
Who you got in here, huh? As if I need to ask.
Hey, you're wasting your time.
Is that why you flew out here? Huh? Tell me I'm wasting my time?
Go ahead, dig it up. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, that's what you look like. The guy who doesn't give a shit.
That's ridiculous.
How long are you gonna keep lying for, Mikey, huh? When's it gonna stop? What happens in the dark comes out in the light.
Oh, give it a rest, Trevor. There's nothing there.
This is it. Moment of truth. As if I didn't know. Brad!
Look, we do what we gotta do to survive. This thing, it didn't work out the way it was supposed to.
Oh, and how was that, huh? With Brad in the can and me in the ground, or both of us in the coffin?
Brad got shot. You saw it. He didn't make it. I got shot. I did. That's it.
I think the only thing that didn't go as planned was me showing up on your doorstep 10 years later. Mikey, I mourned you.
And I missed you. But I got a fucking family, Trevor. We were all gonna die. He did die.
You reptilian motherfucker!
I didn't want it to come to this.
Yes, you did! You just don't have the fucking balls to do it! But I do!
I got more to lose than you.
Never a truer word has been spoken, brother. Now pull the fucking trigger! You ain't got the guts.
Take the fucking shot!
Who is that? Fuck!
God!
Fuck!
Trevor Phillips! Mr. Cho has requested a word!
Hey, ho, I'm not the guy you're looking for.
Hey, get the boyfriend!
Boyfriend? Motherfucker.
So that scene at the church is very unrealistic for two reasons in the game. Because anybody that lives around this area would notice two things right away in that scene that is off. And there's two simple things in the game that are video game logic, but it would not work in real life. The first thing is Trevor is actually digging up Brad's grave. And so when Trevor is actually digging up that grave, I'll have a little screenshot on the screen right now. But Trevor has been there, it looks like, for at least an hour digging, if more than that. And what I'll say about this is when they're in the game, it looks like it's the dead of winter there. And if you try to take a shovel and you try to dig into the dirt here in like the dead of winter, it'd be like digging into rock. The ground is like frozen solid in most places. And so you really wouldn't be able to do something like that. So when Trevor when Trevor is like is digging in that, it just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't. But that's, you know, I know people are gonna say it's just a video game professional. It's not meant to be real life or anything. I get that, but I'm just saying that, you know, for this climate here, because like I said, this is a pretty cold state. Me personally, the cold doesn't really affect me that much. Like I can, you know, I honestly speaking, I know some people are gonna think I'm crazy for this. I'd rather it be 20 degrees outside than 100 degrees. That's just the way I am. I cannot take the heat. I just can't stand it. And I don't live in this area here. And like I said, not even gonna say the state that I live in. I live drivable distance here, but I'm pretty familiar with like the bit of the geography here. And I just personally cannot take the heat. Like a lot of my friends moved to Florida, but the heat, I can't take it. I just can't, you know. But somebody else can take the heat just fine, and they can't take the cold. But I'm the other way. I can't take the heat, but I can take the cold just fine. So I was actually outside when it was actually like 10 degrees when I was getting the PS5. So I stood outside Target for literally like like 2 hours outside. It was like 10 degrees. So you know, personally for me, I'm just saying is that I don't mind the winter. I'm fine with it, and that's, you know, one of the reasons I'm fine with this type of area, this type of climate. But I don't live in this town, again, just saying. I live in another town. Town. It's a bit farther away from here. It's yeah, I would say it's like you know, 6-7 hours drive from where I live. But anyways, what I was saying is about the ground. So with the ground is, you know, you try to dig into the ground here, it's just not going to work. You know, it would just be like digging into, like, you can like shovel snow and everything. That's fine, but that's because snow's above the ground. If you try to dig into like the ground, yeah, it's going to be frozen. It's like so cold, it'll be like digging into rock. It just wouldn't work. So like Trevor's digging into it like it's nothing, like it's like the summertime. The second thing that's very unrealistic about that scene is that you notice Michael is actually dressed up all warmly. Trevor is a little bit, but Trevor actually has no gloves. And that actually is very significant. That makes a huge difference there. Now, the thing about this is, when you spend outside in the winter time, you know, when you spend outside, oh, church bell is actually ringing too here. But when you spend outside in the winter time, when it's like really cold, then you want to have some gloves on. You want to have something on. And me personally, like I said, I can take the cold just fine. The cold doesn't bother me. But everybody's hands are weak. Like, hands are some of the parts of the body that are like very susceptible to the cold, more so than some other parts of your body. And so if you actually do not have gloves on, so like Trevor, it looks like Trevor's been outside for like an hour or two in the game. And so when Trevor's been outside for like an hour or two, he's digging with no gloves on. And judging by, you know, the depends on the month, but if this is like, you know, January, let's just say January, when like Trevor is digging up, because like January and February are the brutalest months. When you have those months, it can, you know, get to minus 20 Fahrenheit, and I'll actually have that on the screen what that is right here, converted to Celsius. But basically, in that type of climate, if you don't have gloves on, and it's around like 10 or 15 minutes, you can get frostbite on your hands. That's how quick it can happen. So if you're outside for 10 or 15 minutes, and it's like minus 10, minus 20 around there, your hands are gonna get frostbite. Now, you can be outside for some time in that type of environment, as long as you're dressed warmly. If you're dressed warmly, you know, you got a good coat on, you know, you've got a hat on, you know, protect your ears, you know, protect your face, you got gloves, you'll be fine for the most part. Not recommended to stay outside for very long, but you could theoretically be out as long as Trevor was. But if you're out there and you're digging like with, you know, no gloves whatsoever, Trevor wouldn't have hands left. That's all I'm saying. It's like after an hour or two. So I know it's like, you know, people are saying, oh, it's, you know, video game logic professional. It's not meant to be real life. You're looking at it too much. But I'm just saying is personally that little detail, because sometimes when I see these little things, they bother me a lot. So that was just it personally. It's like they could have just had gloves on. It would have been a simple thing. But I just think personally it was very unrealistic that he's digging in the ground when it's you know, wouldn't work. But at least I could have at least ignored the ground part if they had at least given him gloves. But that was just it. I'm sorry if that, you know, if I'm annoying anybody with that, but it was just those two small little details that just bothered me a little bit. But what about the Cash Depot place? This is one place that I actually haven't covered in the video, and it's because I don't think that it's a real place. It's the robbery. It's the beginning of the prologue. If it is based on a real place, please let me know down below. But I don't think that a bank like that, like at least that, style exists. There's banks obviously in Bismarck, but I don't think that the Cash Depot place was based on a real building. I think it's just a fictional location. However, though, there is something else that I'll say about the prologue. There's one thing in the prologue that the prologue I think actually got done realistically, and that was how Trevor escapes. Now, you're probably wondering, how the hell did Trevor escape? A lot of people actually don't talk about that. You just see that final cutscene. Trevor gunned down dozens of cops, and somehow he manages to escape. And the police never catch him. Why did they never catch him? The reason they didn't catch him was because of the weather. The weather actually saved Trevor. Trevor managed to escape during a whiteout. Just take a look at this right here.
Kill me, you prick! Hey, you, hey!
Oh, God! Don't shoot!
Where's the chopper?
I don't know what you're talking about!
Fucking stay back! You come near me, she's fucking dead! Stay back!
Oh, God, help me! Help! Oh.
Go! Go!
So as you can see right here, and I put a screenshot up, is after Trevor dropped the hostage, there's, you can see the conditions that Trevor is running away in. Now, for people that don't know what a whiteout is basically a really bad snowstorm, but not just a regular snowstorm. It's a snowstorm that has very poor visibility, basically a lot of fog, very hard to see. And so some whiteouts, aren't that bad, where you might actually be able to see farther than 100 meters, but other whiteouts can be really bad where you see underneath that. And so, basically, this means that it will just be so hard to drive because you have to drive so slow and you can't see what's in front of you. Now, I want to mention another thing, and this is relevant to the whole whiteout discussion. There's a TV show called Fargo, but there's also, most importantly, a movie called Fargo. And I highly recommend, if you guys like the North Yankton storyline, I highly recommend that you guys watch the movie Fargo, the 1996 one. The TV show is also based in the same universe as the movie, but the TV show takes place after GTA 5. But if it wasn't for Fargo in 1996, that movie, you probably wouldn't have this North Yankton storyline. The two characters, the two main bad guys in that movie, the two criminals, are actually they are what heavily inspired both Trevor and Michael. And actually, one of the criminals, one of the two guys, is actually insane. And hint, it's actually not the guy who's laughing; it's the guy who's more quiet, who's actually kind of insane. But yes, the two guys in the movie are heavily inspired, both Michael and Trevor. And if you actually look at the police, what the police are actually wearing in the movie, and you compare it to what the police in GTA 5 in the prologue are wearing, it's almost identical. So you can see where Rockstar got the inspiration for North Yankton from. It was from Fargo and from the movie Fargo and Bismarck, but not to be confused with the city, because Fargo is a city also. It's the largest city in North Dakota, but Ludendorff is more based on Bismarck, even though there is a little bit of inspiration also from Fargo. Now, what I was saying about whiteouts is whiteouts happen here. I've seen whiteouts before. I haven't driven in whiteouts, but I have seen them. And so they can get a bit scary. It's a bit hard to see outside. This is basically think of like a sandstorm, but think of it with snow. It's kind of like it. Snow will be blowing all over the place, very poor visibility, snow constantly raining down, and on top of that, typically it's really cold conditions. And so what happens is outside the cities in a state like North Dakota, outside the cities and the towns, it's not like New York where I grew up, like driving through the countryside. Like in New York, when you're on the highway, you will have an exit pretty much every mile when you're on the highway. But in a place like North Dakota, you can drive for 20 miles with no exit, which basically there's a lot of countryside, a lot of places that you could argue are, would be defined as the middle of nowhere. So a lot of rural areas, very little population in between towns. So you could be driving for 20 miles and maybe not even see a house. That's, what the countryside can be like at times. You might see like one or two houses occasionally, but you won't really see any towns for several miles. And so basically what that means is that if you get trapped in that area, if you get trapped in the countryside, like you're driving in the countryside during whiteout conditions, you stop you're 20 miles or so from a town and your car breaks down in those whiteout conditions, you just lost the heat, you can't see around you, there's a huge chance that you're screwed at that point. And even if you call 911, if you call for help, that the first responders would also be put at risk trying to save you. They would be put at risk trying to go out there and trying to find you in the middle of nowhere and driving through those whiteout conditions where they can barely see. And so this is why, you know, the governments in these areas tell people all the time, they tell them, do not drive outside the towns, don't drive outside the cities when it's whiteout conditions. Because then, if you crash or something happens to your car and you get stranded, that puts the first responders at risk. So the government always says that, you know, don't drive outside in these conditions. Typically in the city, if you're driving in the city during whiteout conditions, it's still frowned upon, but it's not frowned upon as much as if you leave the city. If you're driving in the countryside on those rural roads and you're driving during whiteout conditions, that's really bad. And I'm on the picture right here, I have a few pictures of whiteout conditions actually in North Dakota and what it actually looks like. And so in the Fargo TV show also, in season 1, there's a shootout, and I don't want to spoil, we know what's going on, but basically in the TV show, a little bit of summary, is you have 2 hitmen that are trying to take on another hitman. And I highly recommend to watch this TV show and watch the movie, because the movie and the TV show covers something that you almost never see in movies and games, and that's Midwestern gangsters. You actually see what the Midwestern Mafia and Midwestern gangsters are like. Because typically, you know, and when I say Midwestern Mafia, I'm not talking about Italian Mafia necessarily. But a lot of these movies and games, they cover, you know, all these gangs on the East and West Coast, but they never cover Midwestern gangsters. So if you're interested in that, highly recommend to check out the TV show. But in one episode in season 1, there's a shootout between 2 hitmen. 2 hitmen try to take out another hitman. And what happens is, during the shootout, whiteout conditions happen. And the whiteout conditions actually help the hitman actually escape from the other 2 hitmen. And then the police show up, and then the police actually get confused in that, and then it turns into a tragedy, because it's just too hard to see. And this is exactly the reason. This is why Trevor escaped. This is how Trevor escaped. He escaped during these conditions. If it wasn't for the whiteout conditions, he probably wouldn't have been able to escape. So there's actually a strong chance the police actually might have called off the search. They actually might have thought that he might have frozen to death, or he would have died somewhere in the wilderness. But Trevor is actually from Canada, so he's no stranger to the cold, and that's how he managed to survive. He probably, you know, traveled a few miles through those whiteout conditions, and then he probably, you know, hid in some cabin, eventually probably hot-wired a car, and that's how he probably ended up escaping. You know, we don't know the full details, but that's how Trevor escaped. It was the whiteout conditions that you can see clearly at the end, and that's actually what I found realistic, because the police would not be wanting to go through that. You know, they would have to, you know, this isn't in the town anymore, this is in the countryside. They'd have to be leaving the countryside, going, you know, out there, you know, with barely any towns, any buildings, trying to find Trevor through that, you know, foggy snowstorm when, you know, temperatures are dropping. So, you know, nobody is going to, you know, want to look for him. Even if it's, you know, a crazy murderer like Trevor, you know, people aren't going to want to go out there during those conditions and look for him. And so there's a chance the police in North Yankton might have actually called off the search. And like I said, if you take a look at what the police wear in Fargo in the movie, and you take a look at what the police wear in North Yankton, it's extremely similar. So you can just see where the rockstar had gotten the inspiration from for it. So this right here, this is another view of Bismarck, and this is, you know, this is from my hotel. This is early in the morning. This is like 7 o'clock in the morning. If you guys want to check this out, so let me show you guys this view here. This view is actually really cool, just with the sunset coming up. So yeah, this is just a view of Bismarck in the early morning. And again, even though I don't live, like, extremely far from here, I just didn't want to drive back at night, because it's just driving in between, like, towns, you know, at night here, it's like, it's, you know, pitch black. The city you can see, don't get me wrong, but, you know, when you're driving back between, like, you know, towns and cities, it's just really, really dark at night, and, yeah, not a lot of great visibility. But, just amazing view. Very, very cool sunrise. And right now it is actually 19 degrees Fahrenheit. That is actually how cold it is right now. I also wanted to show you guys this. So this is a church that I was passing by along the road. So this church looks a lot more like the Ludendorff church. But yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of these old, like, you know, white, building styles. You know, these buildings are probably, I'd say, at least over 100 years old. So there are, like, a lot of these, you know, a lot of these buildings in the region. And yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to show you guys this building really quick, this church, because this church did remind me a bit of the North Yankton one. And here, final part of this video. This I wanted to show you guys. This is what the countryside looks like. And so, you see what I said? There's very little trees. There are very little trees in the wilderness, but there's like there's these small patches of trees, a lot of farmland. So you see like there's like these small patches of trees that you'll see like, you know, pop up. But other than that, this is, you know, what what the terrain looks like. Let's compare it to North Yankton. Let's see. Did they get it right?
Come on, let's get to the chopper. We move quick, we can beat the train. We're getting there.
Yes, so as you guys saw from that, they got the terrain perfect in GTA. There's not a lot of the countryside you can explore in GTA, maybe just a few blocks, but they had gotten it perfect. It's perfect. So yeah, and this is pretty much it for the video. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. This was not an easy video for me to make. You know, this took me, you know, a trip of like, you know, 2 days. You know, it's within drivable distance for me, but yeah, just a bit of vehicles. It is within drivable distance for me, but it's just the reason that I ended up booking a hotel at that city. The city I did book there yesterday was because I don't like driving at night, and so as you can imagine, this type of area at night when you're driving through it, it's just pitch black. That's pretty much what it's like. But anyways, yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop a like, and if you think somebody else will enjoy it, then share it. It does help the channel out and does help the videos. So thank you guys for watching. See you on the next one. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day, guys.